Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us again this wonderful morning. As the temperatures rise, people are hopefully going to go out a little more and interact. I want to start today's class with a different approach. This morning, unfortunately, I heard that my aunt passed away in Eretz Yisrael. My aunt was in her 70s. Unfortunately, she had complications and she got COVID. And she was on and off for the last couple of days. And this morning, I found out that she passed away. I just want to talk about her for a minute because I think it fits very nicely with our discussion of Lashon Hara and looking at other people and thinking about other people. And I wrote on our family chat, our family WhatsApp group, I for just a small little thing this morning, I just wrote it was maybe 4 lines about her. And I just want to share and expand a little bit, and then we'll go into the class. Her name was Leah, right? My aunt Leah. She grew up in America. Regular American girl, lived in Toronto for a little bit, and then they made an aliyah. They moved to Israel. I think it was 89 or 90. That's when they moved to Israel. And she made Israel, Eretz Yisrael, her home. She was a lady who I would say that it would probably be almost impossible to make her get angry at you. You know, there's a very famous story in the Talmud of Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the elder, where there was a bet. Two people made a bet that they can make Hillel angry. Right? One guy said, I can make Hillel angry. And the other guy said, I don't think so. You can't make Hillel angry. And they bet, I don't know, $100, whatever it was. They made a bet. And so one guy goes Friday afternoon, probably it was a short Shabbos, right? And he goes to Hillel. Hillel's taking the bathhouse, taking a shower or cleaning himself up, whatever they did in the bathhouses back in the Roman era. And he says, Hillel, Rebbe, I have a question. And so Hillel comes out and says, yeah, you get dressed, comes out and says, what can I do for you, my son? And he starts asking the most weird questions, right? Why do these people have that? Why do they have flat feet? Why do they have pointy eyes? But he doesn't ask all the questions at one time. He asks one question, he said, oh, thank you. And then he leaves. And then he comes back a couple minutes later after Hillel had enough time to sort of get back into his routine, comes back, right? And asks another question. And constantly, and Hillel wasn't phased. Hillel answered, my son, how can I help you? Right? He just wasn't phased. At the end, finally, the guy, after a couple times, realized that he wasn't going to change Hillel. He wasn't going to get Hillel angry. So he started crying. So he said, why? He says, you just made me lose $100, whatever, 100 gold coins. You just made me lose. All right. So Hillel said, I'm so sorry, my son. Let's try to work this out after Shabbos, something like that. Well, I'm so sorry that you had to lose that. And it's just an epitome of someone that doesn't reflect upon themselves, but thinks about other people, right? And my aunt, the little bit that I wrote about her was she always had a smile. She always saw the good in people, right? And whenever she talked, she always had like a laughter to her. She always had a laughter to her. But then also what I believe caused all this was she had a tremendous emunah, tremendous faith in God, an unbelievable faith in God. And, just if we could just take a little bit and want to dedicate today's class in her memory, right, that this concept of thinking about others, caring about others is so crucial and important. She was contagious. Whenever I remember when we lived in Eretz Yisrael, unfortunately, last time I saw her was a couple of years ago. It wasn't the last time I was in Israel, but I think the time before that, right? I didn't have a lot of time when I was visiting there. So she lived in Bnei Brak, so it was hard to get there. And I feel bad. But I remember every time she was contagious. Whenever you talked with her, she always was laughing. She always had a smile. Something was happening. The air conditioning wasn't working. And believe it or not, in Bnei Brak in the summer, if you don't have air conditioning, it's a lot worse than Jacksonville. Right, and it's in a crowded apartment. Right, she always found something somehow. To remember one time she said, "Okay, so let's take the chicken soup and let's put it in the freezer. And we'll have cold chicken soup. We'll cool down that way." And it was like hello, you don't have cold chicken soup. Like chicken soup is, no, it'll be good. It'll be like a popsicle. It'll be like great, right? So it's just, I think she was the epitome of everything that we're learning about. She was the epitome of someone who truly, truly cared about other people, who truly lived life to its potential, and truly saw the joy in every aspect. And I believe that that's rooted in, to be able to reach such a level is rooted in emunah and faith, because to truly be able to find all the good in every day, right? To be able to truly find, you have to have faith, because if you don't have faith, you don't believe, right? Of course, it has to be based on logic. You have to learn, you have to study, you have to ask questions, right? But the stronger you build your relationship with God, as we mentioned many times, the more you'll understand how it's so silly and stupid to get upset at other people, right? Right? It's so silly. That's the word. I'm no better words. It's so silly, right? Because we're all created in God's image. We're all His children, right? And we all are trying to build a relationship with Him, right? So why mock someone else? Why talk negative about someone else? Why not live with a smile, right? We have that opportunity every day, right? Every day we have that opportunity. So just a little tribute to my aunt, and may her memory be for a blessing. We're going to miss her dearly, and the learning that we do today should continue to elevate her soul. She doesn't need any of our merit, but as tradition tells us, right, that neshama's soul always could use merit of other people. The only way to truly give to someone is by learning for them and doing charity, tzedakah for them, because once the soul departs the body, they can't do anything anymore. They can't create anymore. Right? So the only avenue of their neshama still to grow is through us doing things for them, mitzvahs, acting properly, giving charity, and learning in their memory. So may her memory be for a blessing, and she'll be missed dearly. So we're on page 104, day 26. And if you remember last time, we spoke about two interesting cases. Where one, I just want to repeat it quickly. Page 100 was where your boss asks you to, say lashon hara, to say something about someone else, and it might be even a threaten of your job or your position or something like that. And we spoke about that you have to be very careful that just because you might lose your job doesn't mean to say that it gives you the right to speak lashon hara. And we said just like every other mitzvah, right? The same way, just because it's cheaper to buy, the other day I was in Publix, right, and there was no chopped meat, no kosher chopped meat. Right? Forget about cheaper, right? I went to Winn-Dixie, right? Drove up to Winn-Dixie. They also are out of kosher chopped meat, right? That was it, right? I just spend money driving up there, not that much, but time and money, and no chopped meat. Just go one aisle over, and there's a chopped meat, right? And it's much cheaper. It's a bigger quantity. It's much cheaper. But that those that keep kosher understand that you can do, or whatever it is that one is doing, right? Just because if you chop someone's head off, you could take their savings, right? Or if you're stuck in a desert island and there's two people, right, and the other person has a bottle of water, you're not allowed to go ahead and kill him just because you want his bottle of water. You're supposed to try to get him to help you out, but you're not allowed to kill the person or harm the person just because you want his bottle of water. So we understand that in each one of us, on whatever level of a spectrum that we're holding, we understand that there are things that we're not allowed to do, right? For that. So lashon hara is the same way, right? And that's what we spoke about. That lashon hara is the same way. Yes, it's a prohibition in the Torah. You're not allowed to speak lashon hara about someone else, and therefore, even if your job's on the line, right? If it doesn't have any of the categories of what you are allowed to say, you're not allowed to. Right, and we spoke about different ideas to try to speak to the conscience of your boss. So try to avoid it. Try to say things in a way that would make it that you're not actually speaking lashon hara. The next scenario was sort of just a slightly different, where it's your own business is getting harmed, right? Someone else is bad mouthing your business, right? You are the only bakery, the only whatever, or there's others, but someone else pops up new, or whatever the scenario is. Someone is bad mouthing, saying false advertisement, false or not false, doesn't make a difference, right? About your business, and now your business is taking a hit. Are you allowed to play fire with fire? And we spoke about that you're not allowed to, right? You're not allowed to go ahead and say negative things about the other person, right? Oh, he might be cheaper, but you know, you better watch out for next time you go up a big hill and you want to use your brakes, right? Yeah, he puts in those cheap pads, you know, and they don't last that long, or whatever it is, right? You're not allowed to, right? You're not allowed to do that. We did say in this scenario, you should speak to a Rav, right, to a halakhic authority that is an expert in the laws of kosher mishpat, the laws of the monetary laws, because there are certain things that you are allowed to do within the regards to the laws of monetary, that the Beis Din or others might be able to levy fines against the other person, or you know, say that if he's acting in a certain way, or if he is within a certain confine, there's only a certain amount of people that buy this stuff in a small town, right? It's known that this small town can't won't be able to support 2 bakeries, right? That's just, it's known. So if there was one bakery that opened up and then another one opens up, in Jewish law there is a concept of going over the borders of someone if someone's already established. It's not our class to go through the laws of monetary. As I mentioned, it's a whole section in the Code of Jewish Law, and it's complicated laws, right? But I just want to reiterate that it's important to remember that one shouldn't think that his whole thing is for nada, and shouldn't think that he has no hope, right? Don't be negative, but try to work in a positive way. Speak to a rabbi, right, who's an expert in the laws of monetary, and see what he or she can do, right, to avoid that person still hurting their business. All right, so that's sort of just a quick recap of what we spoke about last time. The reason why I'm saying it is because the next scenario, right, is in a different way, right, but along the same lines of what we're saying, but from a different direction. The scenario I want to talk about today, right, is we're starting to, we keep on saying this word toelas, right, that I'm sure you guys all are itching on the edge of your chairs, right? I see you all like, oh my gosh, right, your faces in the computer, right? Toelas, right? Toelas means to say for a purpose, right? And we spoke about that you are allowed to say, quote unquote, Lashon Hara. It's not Lashon Hara because it is permissible, right? When there's toelas, when there's a purpose, when there's a good reason to say it. Now, what category is a good reason? Not what you think is a good reason or what I think is a good reason, and what the Torah, the law tells us is considered a good reason. So we're going to start, we touched upon it a little bit here and there. The next 2 cases that we're going to talk about are starting to get into this idea of toelas. And hopefully once we finish all of the different categories of toelas, we'll do a recap and sort of put it in a structure, and maybe I'll even print it out. I won't print it out, I'll put it on the computer, and I could email it to people and put it on and share my screen. And once we get to that, probably be in a couple of weeks. But we're starting to talk about the concept of toelas, when it is permissible to say something about someone, right, when there's a reason for that. So case number 1 that we're going to talk about is on page 104, day 26. And the dilemma is like this, right? Your good-natured friend wants to hire a troubled teen to help him in his bagel shop, right? So the person is always there to help other people, a great person. And I take my hat off for those people that really, give opportunities to teenagers that are troubled, or adults that might have had a sketchy past past. I give my hats off to them, that they have a good nature, want to give people the opportunity, and I say kol hakavod. But at the same time, right, that this boy has drug problems or has been caught stealing, right? So it's not just, troubled teen that, maybe hung out with the wrong crowd, or, is not enjoying school so much, or things like that. But there's more to his troubles that might affect, right, the business. And so either he had drugs or he's been caught stealing, right, or other things like that, where it could directly impact the person's business. And so, should you warn your friend? Should you warn this person? Say, listen, I think it's great what you're doing. Just FYI, this boy has in the past, been caught stealing. This boy, has been in the past, known to be taking drugs, and it might affect, his customer service. It might affect his coming. It might affect, his action or whatever this job is, right? Are you allowed to tell your friend this piece of information? On one hand, you're saying something negative about someone else. Classic lashon hara, right? Judge the person. It's not for you to say. But on the other hand, right, this person that's hiring this person, they have to know. Right? They have to know. So let's look at what it says. This question falls under the category of te'elis, the magical words te'elis that we've been sort of dodging, talking about a little bit, saying a little bit here and there, and now we're actually speaking about this concept of it. This falls under the category of te'elis, a constructive purpose to which, under certain circumstances, lashon hara may be told. Or we're not allowed to, right? We're not allowed to say it in negative, to others, or to say it in a negative way. We're also not allowed to stand by and watch them be harmed, right? According to the mitzvah of, right, do not stand by this shedding of your fellow's blood. So now I just read this quickly, but I want to talk about this outside, because this is really the first time we're really talking about te'elis, and we have to try to understand the categories of how te'elis works. And again, we're going to build this up as a pyramid. We'll build it up as a pyramid, but think about it like this. We have on one hand the mitzvah of lashon hara, right? L'sochel rachel ba'amacha. Do not be a peddler to your nation. Means to say in a negative way, to say negative things about people. It's going to hurt the person. You have to care about the person as an individual. Right? We spoke about saying negative things about someone that will harm the person, as if you're killing him. I don't have to elaborate too much. We've talked about many things of how this is something that is extremely harmful, right? And a very high level of prohibition. But on the other hand, there's another verse in the Torah. Another verse in the Torah tells us, and this is beautiful, because it's also part of v'ahavta recha kamocha, part of the laws of loving your neighbor, loving your fellow person, is you're not allowed to watch them stand idle while their blood is being spilled. Right? So if you're, the example we gave yesterday about not in the Talmud tells us it doesn't mean literally being spilled. Could be literally being spilled, but not literally. Right? If you're driving down the road and you see someone that has a flat tire, right, and you know the person, or you know that the person's not going to, take out a machete and chop you up, right? So you're not scared to stop on the side of the road, right? Unfortunately, there's crazy stories nowadays, right? But you're in a big public place and you have the time, there's a mitzvah, right, of helping your fellow man, your fellow person. It is do not stand idle, right, while your friend's blood is being spilled. Now, as we said, it doesn't mean literally being spilled, but your friend needs help, right? Your friend needs help. You're not allowed to stand idle. And that falls under the categories of ben adam l'chavero, between the mitzvahs between man and his fellow. Also, right? Lashon hara is telling you not. This mitzvah of making sure that your friend's blood is not being spilled is telling you maybe yes, right? And they're both under the category of v'ahavta recha kamocha, of loving your fellow man, under the category of ben adam l'chavero, between man and his fellow. So now the question is, how do we work these two things? We seemingly have two contradictory things. Because on one hand, if I tell my friend I am saying things about the person, right? It's past, not something right now, right? Could be happened a little while ago, whatever it is, right? You haven't heard yet that the person has gone to to drug rehab, or the person has changed his ways. You haven't heard one way or another, or you might know that he hasn't, right? Or you don't know, right? So on one hand, that's lashon hara. You're saying something negative. On the other hand, right, if you just stand idle while your friend hires this person, right, you might be standing idle while the person you're spilling, your friend's blood is being spilled. Over here, his monetary, his business, which is part of his lifeline. Right? If there's no bread, ain't Torah, there's no Torah. You have to live. right? You have to have, and we spoke about that in the Morning Minute yesterday, right? The balance of faith and our personal effort, right? We have to have a balance. We have to realize that, yes, we have to believe in God, and that's a core value, but at the same time, we also have to have our effort. We can't rely on miracles. So if this person is going to hire someone that is a known stealer, and he's going to steal things, and he'll take the change from the cash register, or he's going to start taking products from the thing, the guy's going to start losing his business. Or worse, the guy, if he's acts in a certain way, customers don't want to come in, or gets a bad name. So on the other hand, you're standing idle while your friend, right, his blood is being spilled. So what do you do? Right? What do you do? All right. So there's a whole section, right, of where it's a toelis, where there's a purpose. Right. So the laws of Lashon Hara, I don't want to say come second, are not secondary, but the laws of Lashon Hara do not apply. That's a better way of saying it, because it's not secondary. And it's very important to know, and I'm just going to tell you a rule in general, that when one thing overrides the other thing, it doesn't mean to say that it's secondary. It just means to say in Torah law, right, we have sometimes that this applies and sometimes it doesn't apply. And there's certain things that override this thing, and therefore makes it not that it's secondary, because there's no mitzvah that's secondary. That's Pirkei Avot. When we did Pirkei Avot, if you guys remember, we spoke about, right, that we don't know the reward of a mitzvah. We don't know the punishment of an aveira. We have no clue what's more special, what's not, what's greater, what's not. People, oh, well, this mitzvah, right? We have no clue. And for every individual, it can be different. Depends on what his challenges are, what's easy for him, or what's harder for him. So it's not that it's secondary. It's just that when there's, in the laws of Lashon Hara, we have something called toelis. What is toelis? Toelis, one of the categories of toelis is that you can't stand by while your friend's blood's going to be spilled. And that's how the two things work together. So they're not contradictory, right? In Lashon Hara, there's a category called toelis, right? And one of those categories of toelis, right, is when you know that your friend is going to get harmed, right? So then you're allowed to say something. Now, how are you allowed to say it? There's rules, right? And I'm just going to show you, right? In the laws of Rechilus, right? Chapter 1, right? He says like this. He says, one second. Hilchos Isser Rechilus, and he says, one second. Sorry, in Hilchos Rechilus, Klal 9, sorry. The laws of 9, number 1. He goes and he says, and I'm stretching it out, one second. Right? Here. And he says, Im echad rotza, im echad roa, so chaver rotza l'stat me'ezid darba im echad. Someone sees that his friend wants to become a partner or whatever it is with someone else. V'hu l'shar shevadi yisrael alidei iyun ra. Right? This guy knows that for sure it's gonna be bad for him. It's gonna be a bad partnership, or whatever it is. It's gonna be bad. Tzarich l'hagalo. The halakha is tzarich l'hagalo. He has to let him know. The lahatzil mina inyan harahu, to save him from this bad thing. But there are 5 rules, 5 pratim, 5 things that one has to take into account before he is allowed to say something about someone else, even when it's a toelis. Again, there's 2 things. There's number 1, that to toelis, when it's something that is under the category that you're allowed to say something because the person's going to get harmed. In this category, because the person, it's as if you're standing by while your friend's blood is being spilled. Now, Lashon Hara doesn't apply there, but at the same time, this one over here doesn't allow you just to spill your mind. Do you know that boy? Do you remember when Max used to take drugs and steal? You have to be careful how you say it too, right? Because this is not a blanket statement. As we said, the laws of Lashon Hara, and that's why I stress this, the laws of Lashon Hara do not go away. Laws of Lashon Hara do not become secondary. Laws of Lashon Hara are still have a control of how you say this. Because this tells you that you don't have Lashon Hara, but the laws of Lashon Hara still tell you how you're allowed to do this. And he says there's 5 pratim, there's 5 things that you have to be concerned through. And then ve'eluhen, and then he starts going through them. And there's 5 different ones. And again, we're not going to go through them right now, right? But there's 5 different things. And maybe just for the benefit of everyone next week, I will try to summarize them very quickly, right? Because we've been talking about this a lot, and even though it's not in the order of the book, right? But even if later on they bring it in, I think it'll be important to sort of summarize it and to go through it because we've sort of been dodging around it. So next week, God willing, I will summarize it and go through the 5 things quickly. But just to remember that there's 5 things that one has to make sure that he adheres to, right? Before he or she adheres to, before you actually say something about the other person, but to remember that in this scenario, you are allowed to say something, right? And this is sort of the first time where we find this concept of tell us straight out, right? We dodged around it, right? Other times, but this is straight out where it says that we're allowed to. Any questions? Guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself. Any questions or comments? Okay. So let's take a break for a second with the law, and let's go to the hashkafa for a second. Right, and I when I was reading this, it really dawned upon me. Right, sometimes, even though you know something, even though you've learned something, but that's the beauty of reviewing something. The beauty of, and I like to call it relearning it. Right, relearning it is that you see things in a different light, and even though you know something, but it dawns upon you and it hits you in a different way. And it gives you a whole new meaning to this idea. And I want you all to stop and think for a second. You might have read it, 105, right? He's right here. He or she's right here, right? But I want you to stop for a second, right? Because, of course, you're all righteous people. You probably all never spoke Lashon Hara in your lives, right? Because you're all righteous, right? But you might know some people that do speak Lashon Hara, right? Stop for a second and think that before someone speaks, and let's say not if they know they're in a private place, but let's say they're at good old days with Kiddush, right? Right? Before the Corona, when we had Kiddush, right? You're at a dinner, you had a this, you had a that, you're in a park. Excuse me, right? And you're about to say a juicy piece of gossip, Lashon Hara. What is a human's reaction before he does that? So many times you really look around, you focus, and it really dawned upon me. Person looks around. Hey, look around. Is that person here? Is he in the earshot? And make sure they're not at the table next door, next to us. And make sure they're not they're walking by with a l'chaim, We look around. We want to make sure that the person that we're talking about, or someone that might tell that person that I just spoke Lashon Hara, even though they're going to be saying Lashon Hara, but okay, right? But someone else, or just in general, you don't want other people to hear. I just want to tell you. Oh, no one's okay. Good, no one's listening. I just want to tell you. Why is it? Why do you want to make sure that no one else is listening? And they bring out this awesome point, right? One of the hallmarks of speaking Lashon Hara, right, that the speaker usually takes a quick glance around the room to make sure that there's no one there who might take offense at what he or she is about to say. It tells you that no matter how we justify Lashon Hara to ourselves, we know it would offend the person about whom we are speaking. And anyone really cares about that person as well. That is why we look around. We don't want to be caught in an embarrassing situation in which we have to explain ourselves. Therefore, a good way to avoid Lashon Hara is to picture the person about whom you are about to speak. Imagine he or she is standing right there, listening to you. Imagine how embarrassed he will be or she will be when you put this thing to the person in public. If we really think about it, and so this is an underlying current of something that we talked about 100 times, right? And something that I still constantly have to remind myself is that unfortunately we don't think, right? Well, we do, but we don't. It's because we just do things out of routine. We just do things out of, and this is for everything, doing some mitzvot, but especially over here, if we stop to think about why am I looking around to make sure that person, if I think this is important that this person should know, so who cares if they're embarrassed and not embarrassed? I mean, I care, but it's important, right? Well, must be that you realize that you don't really want to hurt that person. You don't really want to hurt that person. So if you don't want to hurt that person, so imagine that person in front of you, because it's as if that person's in front of you, because human nature, as we said, chavra isala, human nature is that person's eventually going to hear, right? And remember, we spoke about scenarios when you are certain the person didn't hear yet, right? So you should go over to the people and say, please don't repeat this, right? Or the question was, if you're allowed to go over to the person and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I said this about you, and we said you're not allowed to. But if you stop for a second to try to avoid the whole thing and say, hey, why am I looking around? Why am I, why am I talking in a whisper? And why am I, you say, here, come, let's go out for a second, right? And then you say it. So imagine that person's right there. And that'll help you, right, to stop and to stop speaking Lashon Hara. Right? And that's something really important to reflect on and to think about. Right? It's unbelievable. So when I read this, right, I was like, hey, no doubt, why didn't I think of that? Like, like, of course, you're always looking around, because we really don't want to hurt people. If it's a malicious person, it's a terrible, so then they don't care and they say it out loud and they don't, so I don't care who hears me, right? I've had talking to somebody, not so, I don't care. Let them hear me. What do I care? Right? What do I care? Right? So you have those people, right? And that's another whole conversation, right? But we're talking about the majority of people that do care about other people, right? And they, even though they might have a juicy piece of information, they really don't want that person to get hurt. So if that's true, so then stop and think about it for a minute and reflect internally. Okay, let's move on. Day 27. So now the next halakha we're talking about is a similar situation, right? But in a different perspective. And it's very interesting. And this might actually happen more often, right? In different scenarios, that one will be in this dilemma. Different people in different stages of their lives, or it depends on their different people that they're involved with. But you have a friend, right, who is the life of the party, right? At every simcha, right? He has a drinking problem, right? He drinks, he becomes all rowdy, and most of his friends laugh it off. But you see this as the beginning to damage his health and his family, right? And unfortunately, some of us have to deal with things like this, where sometimes friends are just to sort of take a second. Sometimes friends can be the person's worst enemy, right? Because they encourage a person to continue because he's so geschmack, he's so great, he's the life of the party. He makes I want you to come to my the way he dances and the way this, and he's funny and he's entertaining, and because I don't want to have a lame simcha, so therefore I want to have this person there, or people get together at a barbecue, whatever it is, let's drill it, and you know what? If you really stop and think about it for a second, this person's having issues. This person has a drinking problem. Yes, that's his way of alleviating his pain, or he is geschmack, but he's lost control, and this is affecting his family. Right? You think his wife's happy, right, that he's drinking this way, or vice versa? And listen, we're in 2021, right? Ladies, has a drinking problem, and husband's not happy. I don't want to, God forbid, we're 2021. I don't want to show one way or another, right? But right. But so whatever it is, it's affecting the kids. The kids could be embarrassed of their parent, or vice versa. Parents, or it's affecting the individual, their health. Right? He's gonna have a liver problem. He's gonna wake up late the next morning, and he's gonna be late to work, or whatever it is. And we know of scenarios like this where sometimes friends edge the person up because they think they don't really, again, they're not thinking, right? Because that's unfortunately what we don't do a lot of times. So now your thing is like this. Could you go ahead, that your friend is close to a particular rabbi. Your friend is close to a particular therapist. Your friend is close to a particular person who's known that has their head straight on and could talk to the person, right? So now may you tell this rabbi, your friend, or whatever it is, your friend's problem and ask him to help him out. Right? So, let's just use rabbi because it is more practical. You're a person in the community, whatever it is, and you want to, you know that someone's having a certain hardship, not something that is happening to them, but something happening with them, and therefore it might be saying something negative about the person, right? If you know a friend's having hardship, financial, whatever it is, of course you should speak to someone that could help out, and that's, God forbid, not lashon hara. And on the contrary, it fits right under standing by while your friend's blood is being spilled, right? If you don't do anything, or you don't speak to the people that might be able to do something. Well, I don't want to get involved, right? That sometimes people say. No, you should get involved. The Torah tells you that you sometimes should get involved. You shouldn't be stand idle while your friend's blood is being spilled. So if it's because, God forbid they're being abused, or God forbid they are in financial problems, or God forbid they can't pay their rent, or they're having other issues, right? It is important to get involved. And again, that's sort of where we're getting to. Over here, the same thing. The thing is, over here, you're saying something negative about the individual. What's the difference between this case and the other case? Right? The case beforehand is where you're helping someone else to be avoiding that person to be harmed by someone else. So you're telling Ruvain, right, about Shimon, right? That Shimon, you're hiring Shimon might harm you. Over here, you're talking about Ruvain, that Ruvain might harm himself, right? So it's even on a greater level where you're actually trying to help the person that you're speaking about. Right? So while there's still many conditions, as we spoke about, the 5 conditions, and we'll God willing, next week, and if maybe someone could send me a reminder, let's say Monday or Tuesday, I'd appreciate that, because my schedule is a little busy, but it'd be appreciated. But hopefully next week I'll try to do a summary of the 5 things, because we're going to get into it much more as we get into Toelas. Right, but as we said, many conditions must meet before speaking. Right, speaking to help this person. Right, seeking to help this person. But this is definitely something which falls under the category of toelas. Right, that is helping the person about whom we are speaking. Right, falls under the category of toelas, and that's really what I read to you beforehand. Right, the scenario of where you're helping the individual, right, from being harmed by himself. Right, and that's toelas. That's helping the person out. So not only is it permissible, and it's not what's easy, better or not. There's 2 scenarios that we spoke about. Is speaking of helping someone not be harmed if he's going to hire someone, or he's going to go into business with someone. Right, the person's looking to become partners with someone, and that this person cheated other partners. This person's is a tough guy. This person is not easy, right? So it's something that you have to let the person know, right? And in the scenario over here also, when you yourself know that this person is harming themselves, right? On the contrary, we are told that it's a mitzvah, right, to go ahead and try to get this person help. Again, making sure that we're within those categories, that we don't transgress lashon hara, right? But it is actually a mitzvah, because you shouldn't be standing idle while your friend's blood is being spilled. Not to become a meddling person, not to become a yenta, right? In any way, right? One has to be careful, and that's going to be one of the categories, right? We'll see. You have to be careful to make sure that you don't lose yourself in doing the mitzvah, because as we said before, sometimes people want to do a mitzvah, right, and they lose it, and it turns into navera, right? It's brought down. The Chavetz Chaim and Ber Ma'an Chaim brings down a famous quote, right? That it says, the Torah says that you should rebuke your friend. You should give your friend rebuke. But right afterwards it says, but make sure that there's no sin. In the commentaries, I'll ask, lo sisa alav chet. You shouldn't make for him to be a sin. What does that mean? And why is it right after? There's many different explanations, right? But a famous explanation that's brought down, and I think the Talmud actually might even say this, right? I don't recall offhand, right? That when you give the person rebuke, make sure that you're not doing it in a way that you yourself will be transgressing a chet, an avera, right? Even when you're giving the person rebuke, right? Even when you're trying to help the person, and make sure that it's not done in a way where you're going to be now doing an avera. If it's done in a way in public, right? That's an example. Now I'll give some rebuke in public. Right? Someone did something in Kiddush or something. How could you do that? Right? Do you know how that terrible that is? How could you? Right? You just embarrass the person in public. Right? So someone has to rebuke you in private, right? Not to do that, right? So that's one kind of category of where one has to be careful when he's trying to rebuke someone, not to do it in a transgression. Another point is our scenario, right? Where you're doing it quietly, you're doing it, in a proper way, but you might overstep the lines of lashon hara, right? So you have to be very careful. Over here, it's not so much the rebuke; it's more seeking help for the person by talking to someone else. And the same thing, even though there's a mitzvah of you shouldn't stand idle while your friend's blood is being spilled, one also has to be careful that it's not done in a way where you're trying to do a mitzvah and you're trying to be a good doer, right? But you're going to end up doing an avera. You're going to end up, right, harming the person, right, and saying lashon hara, and therefore, but through that, doing an avera. I wanted to end today's class, and Bonnie, I saw you wrote a chat. If you want, afterwards, you could just unmute yourself. Right? I just want to end today's class with a quote on page 103. Right? It's a Tanchumim. Tanchumim is a form of midrash. Right? It's one of the midrashim. Right? And it says, Klal Yisrael will not be redeemed until they become unified entirely. Right? Unified. Right? So we have to remember that we are all seeking the days of Mashiach. We are all seeking to be redeemed, right? And we're all pray. We say it in the Anin Mamin. We say it in our prayer. We should Shalayim Ercha. We should be returned to Jerusalem. What does it mean to return to Jerusalem? It means to say a spiritual Jerusalem, right? That's what we're referring to. And we have to be focused on that. This will happen until we are united, right? Until we become one, because let's not forget the second temple was destroyed because of a lack of unity, because of sinas chinam, hatred. Right? So if we're not able to fix the thing that caused the destruction, then how can we go ahead and rebuild the temple, right, with the flaw that we still have? So one of the big ways of being able to start fixing that is, right, avoiding lashon hara, making sure that we don't hurt other people, right, and stop this whole vicious cycle. Because someone said this and someone said that, and that causes hatred, that causes hurt feelings, which then perpetuate. So one of the big ways of doing that is through avoiding lashon hara, and God willing, speedily in our days, Mashiach should come and we should be redeemed. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.